But enough of me ranting. If you're still around here, welcome to topic 2. Topic 2 today, we're going to talk about video games in other media, TV shows, movies, and kind of talk about my feelings about that, and obviously talk about the past success rates that these shows and things have had. How do I feel about it in general? How do I feel about video games making this jump to a more mainstream media, or at least a not physical media, but a, what's the word I want to look for? Live action, maybe? Live action scope of it. It is cool to see. It is very cool to see, obviously, things from the digital media side of things. Video games make it into this more mainstream, more open, availability, I don't know how to phrase it, media of TV shows, of movies. It's cool to see, but obviously, as we've seen from the past couple decades, it's a very mixed bag of success. We've seen some movies do very, very well with their interpretations and kind of almost get like a cult following. For example, a Mortal Kombat 1 did very, very well, and people still talk very highly of that movie. But then there's other movies, like a Doom, or Mortal Kombat Armageddon, or Tomb Raider from 2016-ish, that for some reason just don't do really great and well with how they're presented or their stories or whatever it is. And it's interesting to think of why is it so hard to make this jump? Now, granted, in a video game experience, let's say, okay, Last of Us, for example, we're getting a Last of Us series on HBO Max within the coming year. I don't know when it starts. A Last of Us, in the game's perspective, if you're going to complete that story, you're going to take 8 to 10 hours, let's say, rough guesstimate. So translating something from an 8 to 10 hour experience to a 2-hour experience on film, kind of rough. There's a lot of things you need to either rush or brush by that may not translate the same way in a film perspective, and that may be a big part of the detriment of why these things don't do super well, because just things are missing. I think another reason that it can be hard to do this kind of point to point, one to one, bring it over to this new media, is the experience factor. Obviously when you're playing a game, you are part of that experience. You are commanding things, controlling things. You feel involved in the experience, in this character's growth. What they're going through, you're going through. And not to say movies can't do that, because there are definitely movies that, tug at those heartstrings, make you feel emotions and things because of the events that have transpired, whether this character has lost somebody very important to them, or they go through a personal revelation of character growth by the end of the film. Obviously that can be achieved. For some reason, there's that disconnect when taking video games over to this side of things. And it's hard to fully put a finger on it, but I think it might just be, once again, that user experience of doing the actual actions that may lead to that. For example, Tomb Raider sticking in my head, but okay, a Doom. Let's go with a Doom, because I've seen Doom. I can go off of this 100%. So we got Doom with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. When did this movie come out? I don't know. Early 2000s, most likely. The movie Doom focuses on them in Mars. Okay, Doom's on Mars. Makes sense. Deals with the aliens. The whole film is more about the people talking about the aliens and the threat that they are facing and the mystery elements behind it than actually going out and doing anything interesting about the demons. Obviously, in Doom the game, you're the Doom Slayer, and you're just going through and mowing down a bunch of demons and trying to save, the planet, the galaxy, etc. While in the movie, it wasn't really that. It was this weird, tense kind of thriller of the threat around them without knowing where they were. Eventually, the movie will lead to one guy finally going out and having this big action sequence to clear the ship or get off the ship, And that was cool. It was a little kind of not Easter egg, but like a little nod to original Doom fans because it went the first person perspective. It was all the big guns. You had the BFG in there eventually making an appearance. You had that. But that was like the final 10, not even 10 minutes of the film. But you got like one specific section of that at the end. The rest of the movie was very bland and didn't really fit the game. So it's like, that's where the kind of interest level kind of peels off. Now, I get it. You need a story in a movie. Not that you don't need a story in a game, but like those action sequences, you can't do that constantly in a way in a movie, I guess. You could argue like, but look at like a Lord of the Rings or look at a Marvel movie where they do have a lot of action, but they're all are also these little action orientated, and then also the more story based times where they're talking. It's a weird balance that we have to play because I'm kind of like, as I'm saying it, like, they are kind of taking the same approach, but why is there that disconnect? Now, there are ones that have found a lot of success in this. Obviously, I talked about the first Mortal Kombat movie. A lot of action in that, a lot of techno in that, a lot of similarities to the game there. But then you have something like Mortal Kombat Armageddon, where story kind of lacked and just wasn't very well put together. Maybe that was the flaw. It was just like, we made money, let's make another one. And then you have the ones that are also really successful, like Mortal Kombat 1. The Ratchet and Clank movie that came out in 2016. That was a really good movie. It's essentially just the video game. Like, it's not the live action, so maybe it was a little bit easier to take the digital medium of a video game and just, we'll put it over here in the digital medium of a movie. But that worked out really well. They essentially tried to tell the story of the first Ratchet and Clank, but also add in different elements. So maybe taking inspiration from it rather than trying to do like a one-to-one kind of thing. Maybe that kind of lent to its success. But yeah, it's always been a difficult thing to kind of do, it seems, is where for some reason these video game adaptations have not performed well. Now, there's a couple that are coming out soon, I believe in this year. I talked about Last of Us, HBO Max series, starring Pedro Pascal. That's coming out. And then we also have the Halo series coming out on Peacock, which I don't know anybody acting in that one, unfortunately. And then we also have the Uncharted movie starring Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg coming out next month. It's going to be interesting to see how these play out. Now, something like a series, like a Last of Us, like a Halo, I feel has a little bit more going for it because with the episodic approach, obviously you have more time to kind of divulge into your stories. You don't have to cram things in this only 2-hour window and kind of rush certain elements. So I'm excited to see how these play out, especially with recent series like obviously Mandalorian and the Marvel series. Like, we've seen series do very well where they can kind of expand on their stories. They have the general arc, but then they hop episode to episode and kind of juggle the story points really well, or that build of the story kind of make you more and more interested, kind of lead you along the trail with those breadcrumbs. It'll be interesting to see how these stories are able to implement that as well. I think Last of Us has something going for it with Joel and Ellie's adventure and trying to discover, the cure and dealing with the clickers, the zombie fungus things, and going through that journey themselves. They can take their time of like, we're traveling cross country, dealing with these different encampments and going from there. Papa Griffin Chat mentions The Witcher. Yeah, Witcher has done very well for itself on Netflix as well. I have unfortunately have not watched it, but I've heard a lot of good things, especially as they have released the second season. They're doing very well with that. And I think something that helps with Witcher is two things. One, the books. They have that also to kind of go for inspiration. But also, two, it seems like, now once again, I don't have a lot of Witcher game experience, so maybe I'm talking out of my ass right now. It seems like in the Witcher series, they're kind of taking their own spin on, what was it, Geralt? I think I'm saying that right. And, the lore of The Witcher. It's not like, oh, this is Witcher 3. Oh, this is Witcher 2. This is Witcher 1. Maybe it is. But they're able to do something in that world that makes it interesting. They're exploring more pieces of it than maybe you would experience in the game. Obviously, Witcher's very big open world, so maybe I'm wrong in that point. But Witcher's doing very well. Also, Resident Evil. Resident Evil has its ups and downs movie-wise, as far as I know. There was a recent one that came out, not tied into the main movie line series, that did very poorly. But then the movies, I know for a stretch, they were very, very successful. Now, once again, I haven't watched any of the movies, so I don't know how closely they tie in from the games to the movies. I don't know if they follow a storyline of a Jill Valentine or a Chris Redfield, a Claire Redfield, a Leon Kennedy. I just know, I don't remember the actress's name, but I know she's like a mainstay part of it for all the films. So, from what I recall of trailers, I don't think it necessarily follows the game universe. So maybe that's like an interesting kind of like inspired by Resident Evil, but not one-to-one story. I don't know. As for Halo, I'm a little confused on what they're going to try and focus on with Halo. Now, the Halo series has always been the Spartans, at least early on. Spartans versus, I believe it was the Covenant, the aliens. They could do that if they're just going to rehash that story. Or are they going to go more of a modern approach where they're against, who are they against in 4 and 5? It was some like other alien species. But I'm intrigued to see how that one goes, because how they're able to balance the action with that and the story to make it interesting. Because in the games of Halo, it's a lot of just obviously point-to-point shooter, similar to a Doom, but Doom's more fast-paced, rapid pace. While Halo obviously is like drop on this map, okay, go from point A to point B, achieving some objectives, but you're shooting along the whole time. Paramount Plus. Oh, okay, my bad. Thank you for that. So, like, the only really story elements we had gotten in the games were like brief cutscenes in Halo. So it's going to be interesting how they strike that balance with whatever story they were trying to tell. Something else that I thought of, the more recent Mortal Kombat movie that came out 2021 was good, but definitely had some flaws. And the thing that they did there, they definitely paid respect to the amount of violence in the Mortal Kombat games. There were some fatalities, or there were just very aggressive scenes in their choreography with fighting-wise. But something they did there is they're making their own story. They have an original character, and they're putting their own spin on the tournament itself and why it's happening. And it's not a point-to-point for like Mortal Kombat 1, here's your cast. Some of those characters don't even show up in this film. And I think they got the green light for a second one, so I'm interested to see the continuation of where this story goes. But yeah, that one didn't do too bad. I know it wasn't like the most popular, but it did well. So yeah, I think something that definitely helps with the adaptation is the inspiration versus the point-to-point. Like the video game story, obviously video games can tell very strong and important stories. But sometimes when you try and do that, a point-to-point to a movie, for some reason, it loses something. Once again, I don't know if it's just the user involvement or if it's the amount of time that's spent into that story. It's hard to say. But if it's like an inspiration thing where it's like, okay, this is Lara Croft, this is Jill Valentine, this is Scorpion, I don't fucking know. It's Kratos. Taking the inspiration of like the fundamentals or the characteristics of these characters and then creating your own story, maybe that leads to more success than, oh, this isn't Uncharted because Nathan Drake didn't do this thing, or where was the scene where he did this with so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. Sully doesn't have a mustache, Mark Wahlberg. I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, we're so fixated on, like, if it is supposed to be point-to-point, like, what's missing. We fixate on those things, and that's what makes it bad, quote-unquote. While if it's something that's supposed to be more original, maybe we give it a little bit more leeway. Similar to, like, the Marvel movies, they take, obviously, inspiration from, certain comic book storylines, but it's not a point-to-point interpretation of said storyline. For example, Civil War. Civil War in the comics is very different from the Civil War we get in Captain America 3. Like, maybe that's what helps us enjoy it more and why it does commercially better, potentially. Could also just be the level of care that they put in behind these projects. They're like, oh, is there cheap buck? Let's make it. Or is it something that they're meticulously crafting and making, which, going back to the Halo series, this has been rumored for quite a long time. So it seems like this is something that has a lot of love and care behind it that will perform well. Similar to A Last of Us, where I believe some of the original game directors are also involved in the project, so hopefully that will perform well also. But yeah, it's a whole interesting concept of like, why does something perform well when others, like, why does something do well when others don't, and why was this like so aggressively attacked not really attacked, but like looked down upon compared to other ones, especially when it is a video game adaptation, because there's definitely a wide range of success when it comes to those stories that they're trying to tell. Very interesting. But yeah, time will tell. I'm very excited to see how these next 3 do. I'm sure there's other ones as well. And maybe dive in and go back to some other films like a Tomb Raider from 2016, like a Rampage from not too long ago featuring The Rock, and some other ones to see like, oh, why did this do very well? Why didn't this necessarily do well? Maybe revisit this topic down the road, and be like, oh, it was mainly story stuff, or just care. I don't know. We'll have to see. But this has been another episode of the Wait, What Are We Talking About podcast. My name is Bret, a.k.a. Enigma911, and you can catch this podcast live over on twitch.tv/Enigma911 every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can join the chat like Papa Griff and Lady in Wonderland did today. If you're a subscriber over there, we'd love to have you in on the conversation. If you can't catch live, that's A-OK, and go over to YouTube and podcast services the very next week, where it's broken out topic by topic and put as one big video and MP3 for your amusement on the following Friday. Last but not least, hashtag ad merch store. You can get all of your swag over there, t-shirts, cups, backpacks, and more. Rep the brand, support us. It would be greatly appreciated. Thank you guys so much for hanging out today. I hope you guys enjoyed my rant on the wrestling stuff. Yippee. And I hope you guys enjoyed the rest of the conversation today, also about video games and their adaptations. We got some more episodes obviously coming down the pipeline. Hopefully we'll get some more guests back in the rotation. I know we've done a lot of solo casts, so hopefully we can get some fun conversations and fun people in on the show with you guys. But yeah, I appreciate your guys' support. I appreciate you guys watching, giving this a listen, and we will see you guys on the next one. Take care.